Hi, welcome to NYC Jewelry Week 2022. I'm JB Jones.
And I'm Bella Neiman.
And we're excited to share our virtual program with you this year on our official YouTube page. We invite you to check out our website at nycjewelryweek.com and see all the other amazing programs that we're running this year, both in person and here on our YouTube page. Please subscribe and check out what Bella's going to say about the next program.
So I'm really excited about this one. It's Costume Jewelry, a Dirty Word with Lizzie Fortunato. And I had the pleasure of interviewing Lizzie myself. So enjoyed this program. And if you have any questions, do leave them in the chat. Even though it's not live, we'll make sure that Lizzie gets all of your comments. So sit back and enjoy. Bye. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Bella Neiman. I'm one of the co-founders of New York City Jewelry Week, and I'm incredibly excited for this conversation. I'm joined by Lizzie Fortunato, the creative director of Lizzie Fortunato. And the reason I'm so excited about this conversation is because costume jewelry has become a favorite of mine. I've always loved it, but I have, over the last year or so, have really taken a deep dive into costume jewelry and the history of costume jewelry. And I've long admired Lizzie Fortunato and her sister Kathryn, who are making incredible jewelry in New York. So that's why I'm really happy to be here with Lizzie. Hi.
Hi, Bella. Thank you so much. We're super excited to be here. I'm Lizzie. My twin sister, Kathryn, is my co-founder. Sadly, she has lost her voice, the perils of running a small business. Otherwise, she would be joining us today, but she's off on the side, and I'm so thrilled to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So before we dive into today's topic on costume jewelry, I would love to have the listeners learn a little bit more about you. So can you share a little bit about the brand?
Absolutely. So I'm the creative director of Lizzie Fortunato. It's the namesake line that I founded with my sister almost 15 years ago. Next year will be our 15-year anniversary. And we're based in New York. We're self-funded, independently owned and operated. And our brand is really known for mixed material pieces. So I'm trying to wear a necklace that's representative of our aesthetic, but we're really known for kind of discovery of materials and putting interesting materials together in unique silhouettes. So we might use some semi-precious stones or even precious stones. Some of our pieces have emeralds and sapphires in them, but then we'll use like a leather bolo cord or a rope or a tactile item. So this has kind of defined our brand over the last 15 years. People who are familiar with the brand probably know us most for statement earrings and necklaces, but we've expanded into belts, some leather goods, novelty handbags, scarves, rings, and even a small assortment of 14 karat jewelry, which is a little bit counter to what we're going to be talking about today. But the brand does envelop all of these different things. And over the past 15 years, we've opened distribution to a number of really esteemed retailers. We work with Nordstrom's and Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue. But we still do so much of our production in our Soho studio. So we're a team of 15 making things in the heart of New York City, shipping from here. So many people, when they hear about our business, probably envision like a factory in Asia and a massive warehouse and something that looks very different from how it actually looks. It's really hands-on. We refer to it as artisanal. It's a lot of TLC and hands-on attention to each piece, which is physically made, checked, and shipped from our New York City studio.
Incredible. I mean, your story is exactly the type of story that I want consumers to hear during Jewelry Week, because I think it's so incredibly important. You know, oftentimes we see a brand and we see them in all of the different department stores that you mentioned, which are household names, and you think, oh my God, there must be this huge factory operation. And I want consumers to realize that they're supporting small businesses and where it's very much, you know, a family effort. In your case, you know, absolutely. So it's wonderful. That's so exciting. In 15 years, congratulations.
Thank you. And I love what you're saying about it being a family effort. In addition to my operating it with my twin sister, I feel like the people in our office are like family. One of the women who does the majority of our assembly I found her on Craigslist 15 years ago when I started the business to help me like physically just string beads. Now she's doing like sample making. She's doing like production challenges. If there's something that we technically can't figure out, she's tackling that. So she has become family. When she started working for us, she was pregnant, and now her son is going into high school, and we've like become so close. And I feel like even our vendors who aren't in New York City, we work with stone dealers in Jaipur, India, for example. I'm going in a few weeks to visit one of them, and he invited me to his sister's wedding. So it is very, it's very intimate. There are a lot of faces that we work with. It's not like a faceless operation where we kind of don't know where the product comes from. I love everything that you say. That really resonates about supporting a family and a small business, because it is very much that.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's amazing. How did you get started 15 years ago?
Yes, a great question. I feel like so many, when I talk to other peers, they like talk about these huge businesses, and I'm like, wait, how did that actually come to be? So my sister and I are co-founders. I'm the creative one. She is definitely the entrepreneur of the two of us. We were in undergrad together at Duke University in North Carolina, and I was just loving making things. I had grown up with like a seamstress maternal and paternal grandmother. My paternal one in particular really kind of taught me how to use a sewing machine and got me really into craft work, crewel and embroidery and needlepoint and things like that. And I got to Duke and pretty quickly tired of like the afternoon tailgate scene on a Saturday afternoon, and discovered this local bead store and just like started making jewelry. And as I said, I'd like already kind of grown up sewing and making stuff, and I just fell in love with jewelry and began making necklaces that my entrepreneurial sister was like, wow, we should be selling these. Girls would stop me on the quad and be like, are you the twins that make the jewelry? Can I wear something to a party this weekend? So she was waitressing at a restaurant at the time, and worked out with the owners of the restaurant to rent out one of the back rooms and host our first trunk show, which immediately sold out and funded a spring break trip. And suddenly we had this business on our hands. And we both moved to New York after graduation thinking that we needed real jobs. So she went to Wall Street, and I went to a brief stint in fashion PR. But I was doing the jewelry on the side still. And I had so many friends who had entered the editorial world, just, low-level assistants at Condé Nast magazines, like Vogue and whatnot. And they were saying to me, I know you have a full-time job, but if you're still making necklaces, like my editor's working on this story, I bet I could get something in a story. So slowly but surely, in the most kind of grassroots organic way possible, pieces began getting press and people started taking notice. And I pretty quickly left fashion PR to pursue the business full time, but it was incredibly organic. And our growth was very slow and steady. Kathryn lasted on Wall Street for about 5 years, just running the business nights and weekends. So she would get home from these ridiculous Wall Street hours and help me, write an email to a store, pitch a magazine or whatever it was that I was doing. And it was just kind of the two of us plodding along. And when she quit her job at Goldman Sachs, that's when the business really took off. She was able to devote her energy to the operations and the sales, and we started slowly hiring people. But it has been very slow and measured growth, I would say.
Wow. That's it. First of all, I got chills. Like, just, seriously, listening to your story. First of all, I find that the most successful businesses are those where sort of the responsibilities are sort of split evenly down, where one is the creative and one is like has the business sense. It's so important to be able to sort of support each other in that way. But I also love that, like, people are asking, are you the twins who make the jewelry?
Absolutely. It was, it got to the point where I was taking orders after these trunk shows that my sister would host, and she would have to go to my requisite classes for me because I would be so busy filling the orders. So my parents still joke like, oh, we should get a refund for statistics 101 or whatever, because Kathryn went for me. But, it paid off. I really laid the groundwork there for the business that we have today. And it's amazing that some of our original customers then kind of moved to New York with us and got real jobs and could suddenly afford nicer things and still support us today. So it was, again, like very organic, but really awesome the way it developed.
Incredible. Well, I know we have to move on to our topic, but I have so many other questions about you two and how the business is run, and just because I find it so incredibly fascinating. And, obviously, like you were just talking about, All of the, not only just all of the things that are part of your collection, but also the things you've added to your collection. I mean, starting with statement, you said you started with statement earrings and necklaces, but there's been so much product innovation. And so I guess that brings me to my next question. And what I didn't mention is at the top, the name of today's talk is called Why is Costume Jewelry a Dirty Word, which I love, love, love. So how do you define what it is that you are making? Is it costume jewelry? Is it fashion jewelry? Is it trend jewelry? What's that name for you that you sort of fall under, that genre?
Totally. It's such a good question. And it's honestly one that we internally struggle with. So I think I typically use the word fashion jewelry when we're referring to our work. And I think after doing this presentation or preparing for this presentation, I discovered that fashion jewelry is kind of considered by the industry a subset of costume jewelry. So perhaps we're saying the same thing, tomato, tomato. But before I started researching for this presentation, I guess I would say I use the word fashion jewelry because we cater to kind of a fashion customer. I think the person who shops for Lizzie Fortunato is someone who is aware of what's happening in fashion, is aware of luxury brands. And I think that's why I kind of defaulted to the word fashion. We did some research kind of in advance of this just to understand where the terms fashion jewelry and costume jewelry came from. And it's actually quite interesting because, as you said, costume jewelry has this kind of negative, dirty connotation. And there's an author, named Deanna Farnetti Sarah, who wrote a book called Adorning Fashion, and it's about the history of costume jewelry. And she lays it out pretty succinctly just in terms of how the term costume jewelry evolved, which I think is worth reviewing for the listeners out there who don't know so much about the term, which, to be honest, I didn't totally. But the background is that in the 18th century, the bourgeois class wanted to wear jewelry that was previously reserved for royalty. So they wanted these fine, precious jewels like the royals, and imitation jewelry was born. And this continued into the 19th century as more and more people were wearing non-precious jewelry that still looked like fancy, precious pieces. So in its earliest form, costume jewelry really did imitate fine jewelry. And it wasn't until the 20th century, especially with Coco Chanel, who kind of changed perspective on this. And she basically said, elegant women can wear whatever. They can mix high, they can mix low, they can mix real stuff and fake stuff. And depending on the dress code of the occasion, they can just do whatever. And if they own it, then that's great. And it doesn't so much matter. And so it's kind of her approach that has dictated Kathryn and my understanding of what we do. We love this idea of like taking materials within a given piece and taking an emerald, which is precious, and mixing it with a rope, which is certainly not precious. So I think costume jewelry from that perspective in its original form is something that just indicates that it wasn't precious. And in that regard, that's certainly what we're doing. Fashion jewelry is historically a subset of costume jewelry that's been more dictated by trends. I would say we're not so much trend driven, though we're certainly aware of trends. I think anyone in our industry is aware of trends. We don't try and cater to trends. We always say we are dressing for the woman who's an original dresser. So we love that idea of someone who's like bold and independent. With that said, I still use the term fashion jewelry.
It's really interesting because I just sort of listening to you speak about it, I think, whenever I've sort of talked about costume jewelry and fashion jewelry with collectors of costume jewelry, most of them, they'll use the word costume jewelry, but I feel like the younger generations, for them, it kind of sounds like a little bit of a fuddy-duddy word. So they often kind of don't want to admit that it's like, because everybody loves vintage clothing, but at the same time, for whatever reason, when it comes to costume jewelry, I feel like that connotation isn't as cool as like you're wearing vintage. And so I've also recently been hearing that like with fashion jewelry, it's more so like the Chanel's, the Lacroix, you have Saint Laurent, like, so that would be considered fashion jewelry. But in fact, so many of those designers worked with incredible costume designers to make the jewelry for them. I mean, real artisans, including, Chanel and, like Gripois made all of her jewelry, for example. So it's like, it's interesting to me how this how this word changes. But then I also think of like mass retailers who are selling jewelry as part of their line, and they're calling it fashion jewelry. But in fact, I'm like, it's actually like, I think that's costume, to your point of like non-precious materials and,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the terms have really gotten muddled. And I think what you're saying is exactly right about the word costume jewelry kind of sounding like fuddy-duddy to some younger generations, when in fact it is kind of just the industry term for what we're doing. When I use the word fashion jewelry, I think I'm naively perhaps believing that our pieces are for this luxury consumer, which I think they are. I like to think that she's very intentional about what she buys, that she isn't necessarily buying fast fashion, which she probably is because so many of us do. But that she, in the same way that she might buy a designer bag that's handmade in Italy, she's also investing in jewelry that's handmade, in pieces that are ethically sourced, or in stones that are really limited edition. So I like to think when I use the term fashion that I'm not using it in the sense of like disposable, uber cyclical, buy it for the weekend and then throw it out fashion, but rather in the sense of luxury fashion. So again, this might be naive, but I think my intent with this word is to suggest that the fashion jewelry that we're creating is intentional, is artisanal, is evocative. And if that still means it's costume, sure. I just agree with you that we don't want people to hear costume and think that it's not special just because in the past it was associated with imitation. So I think that's kind of a struggle. And I think maybe we need a new word. We throw around these words like statement jewelry and artisanal jewelry in the office, but I don't think there's like a widely accepted phrase. And it's funny because we always have these meetings about our e-commerce site and like the different category headers. And it's like, should it say jewelry? Should it say fashion jewelry? Should it say costume jewelry under the different banners at the top of the website? And it's something that we definitely internally talk about frequently.
Yeah, I love the word evocative that you just used. I mean, because I think it's so true. I think women are so considerate about what, like what they put on their bodies, and I like, especially when it comes to their jewelry. And I completely agree with you. I think, when you're producing, what like very high quality, pieces, it's intentional. And like, I think women put the pieces on their bodies with intention as well. Like, I don't think I think that's why sometimes the word trend gets a bad rep, because people are like, oh, it's trend. And like, it's just sort of throw it away. But I think in the end, it's all just jewelry.
Totally. And I also think, like as a small business owner, you're obviously going to be aware of the trends. That doesn't mean that you're creating trend jewelry. Just anecdotally, we launched in 2008. And when we launched, like put a bib on it was the big trend. It was like all about big statement jewelry. And we were doing things with like flowers, bows, crystals. It was like the bigger, the better. And we rode that train and we loved it. And it was so, synonymous with my personal style, this kind of like more is more style. And I just really liked that. I hesitate to even say trend, but that direction that the industry was moving in. And then around 2011 or 2012, all of our buyers wanted to see the pendulum swing, or, that's what the industry was dictating. And they came to Fashion Week and came to our showroom and they were like, we want demi-fine. We want simple strand with a little pendant and like much more delicate. And while this wasn't as much our brand DNA, I would be lying if I didn't say we didn't pivot a little bit to accommodate this, because we probably would have gotten out of business otherwise. So I think there's a difference between recognizing industry trends, just like a ready-to-wear designer would, versus being trend jewelry, which for me personally, I associate more with like, high street fast fashion retailers taking a trend piece that they saw on a runway, producing it at an absurdly cheap price, and then offering it 2 weeks later to the consumer. That seems like trend jewelry in the kind of dirty sense of the word. Whereas I think, all small businesses, or all businesses period, need to be aware of industry-wide trends. But it's interesting. I think like when we talk about costume jewelry, you could have costume jewelry that's like a $1,200 beautiful polished Alexander McQueen collar, but you could also have the rip-off version of that, that's a plated alloy look-alike selling, you know, fast fashion shop on Broadway here in Soho. And maybe those both fall under the category of costume jewelry, but, you know, obviously they're incredibly different.
Yeah, absolutely. You also mentioned that, so you show during Fashion Week, and I think that's really cool. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Absolutely. So we consciously decided when we launched the business to work on the ready-to-wear calendar. So we show 4 times a year, spring and fall being our main collections, and then we do a small resort and small pre-fall collection. And part of the reason that we do this is because our production is very hard. We don't just constantly produce. We have to have, you know, time frames for our production. We have to have lead times for our production. We couldn't just constantly show things and take orders for things, because we have to have set windows of times when the things that sell to buyers can actually be produced. And that's why we have to have this cadence when we show to buyers. So we show on a ready-to-wear calendar. We take orders from, you know, say the buyer from Neiman Marcus comes in, places her order, and then we take the next 8 to 12 weeks to produce it, which, as I've mentioned, is pretty painstaking, because you might have someone physically assembling. In this necklace I'm wearing, all of these beads come from different vendors. So it's not like this one comes from the same place as this one. So we might be ready to string this up, and like one little bead in the front is missing because that comes from maybe it's African glass, and it comes from a village in Africa, and the shipment is delayed, or whatever it might be. Wow. So the production window is long enough that we are kind of tied to this ready-to-wear calendar, where we give ourselves time for production, and we then kind of also have associated ourselves with these luxury high-end brands that show during New York Fashion Week. And I think that's powerful too, just in terms of reputation.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I mean, I think it's interesting because, you know, in terms of, you know, costume jewelry or fashion jewelry, I mean, historically, that was really important as well, to sort of, you know, the fashion in a way sort of dictates, and not in a sort of trend-driven way, but, you know, broader shoulders, big brooches, you know, Peter Pan collars, you know, maybe a less delicate, you know, necklace kind of thing. So I definitely think that, again, kind of like historically, that's sort of how it works.
Totally. Well. I love that you mentioned that, because it's funny. We'll have buyers come in who own boutiques. So they're not specifically a jewelry buyer. They're perhaps buying for a boutique, and they're buying shoes, clothing, the whole gamut. And they'll come in and they'll be like, even though you're a jewelry designer, it's like you got the same memo as all the fashion designers this year. Like, I saw purple on the runways. I see amethyst in your collections. Like, what's going on? Did you guys all meet up in the middle of the night and like decide what color to use or something? And it is true. Like, you see these trends, you see this inspiration that kind of starts somewhere from the top and touches all of us. And in that regard, our jewelry, I think calling it fashion jewelry feels fair, because we are speaking to some of like the fashion that's happening in ready to wear and in other accessories categories as well.
So I'm looking in your slide, and it says that, you know, you do mix, you know, like sapphires with rope, you know, resin, cord, brass, all of so precious and non-precious together. Can you talk a little bit about that? That's really cool.
Absolutely. That's something I'd love to talk about, because it's definitely, I would say, what has defined us over the years and kind of separated us from some of our peers. There are so many cool brands in our space, but a lot of them, I would say, work in a more narrow range of materials. So some of like my favorite jewelry designers in our space will be more focused on gold or sterling, and their pieces will be like really intricate, beautiful metal pieces or chain pieces, but there won't be a huge array of like beads or other materials. Similarly, some brands that I love like do exclusively pearls, so they're not necessarily sourcing other things. I think from the beginning, and perhaps part of this has to do with my lack of professional jewelry training, and just the fact that I loved like taking things apart and putting them together, and then going to this one random bead store, and then I would go to a trimming store, and this amalgamation of all these things that I found is what I would turn into a piece of jewelry. So perhaps it stems from that, but I think our brand is very much defined by mixed materials. So one of the benefits of this is that it has made copycats of our product very difficult, because it's masochistic. No one wants to go find all of the stuff that we use and put into a single piece. one of the challenges of that is it's also masochistic for us because we have to go find it. So our lead times are long. There are occasions where something will perform really well in a store or on our e-commerce site, and the buyer will say, can I place a reorder for 20? And we literally have to turn down that revenue because we can't get more of the beads, or it was too hard to produce or something like that. So in some ways, there are limits to this kind of aesthetic, but overall, I think it's allowed us to really innovate. And every time we find a new material, we have a new style. And so that has allowed us to last for this long because, you know, everything feels fresh. As we find new materials and discover new vendors, we can continually take a fresh perspective on this same mixed medium aesthetic that has defined us for so long.
Yeah. Well, it's also really incredible because it kind of goes back to our earlier point about being a small business and everything is, you know, is done by hand and everything is sourced by you. Because, you know, not only do you sort of keep your production small because I mean the pieces that you're using are, I mean, they're hard to find. It's not,
Yes.
you know, this isn't a factory. This isn't, you know, sort of a factory just like stamping pieces out.
Totally.
And that's a really important point. Yeah.
Totally. And I think that, like, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I think that is kind of why we shouldn't, you know, we fall in this under this umbrella of costume jewelry, but I think when people hear costume jewelry, they're thinking about that factory.
Yeah.
So it's separating the two things. Perhaps the factory version of costume jewelry is a dirty word. I don't like thinking about jewelry that is made in unsafe conditions or made you know, with terrible working conditions for the people making it, or is really environmentally unfriendly. You know, all of those connotations of the word, I would agree with are dirty, but I do think because we fall under that umbrella, but are doing it in a very, very different way, we have to be able to kind of extricate those two things and understand, sure, there are people doing costume jewelry that are doing it in an incredibly intentional way and in a way that production is limited because you can't get up enough of a material or because you only have two ladies stringing it. And so it's limited by the manpower.
Yeah. Well, it's artisanal. I mean, I think that's
Absolutely.
also the other thing. I think it's incredibly artisanal because, you know, that sort of, you know, small batch production, choosing all of the pieces, having the pieces strung by hand. Do you have your customers who, since you're saying you release different collections, do you find, you know, sort of year in, year out, you have your collectors come back and say, oh, I remember when you did something in that colorway. Like, will you ever bring it back? Or like, oh, I love this bead. Can you do more with it? Like, do you, you know, is that like, I know you, what do you do then if you don't?
Yeah, it's such, it's a good question. So we definitely have those customers and we're super grateful for that because we have the people who are like, oh, I remember when you used like the rubies on the leather, like, can you do that again? I'm like, oh no, like I found just a small batch of those. And like, you're lucky you own it. And now we're on to the next thing. And people do come back wanting more, but it's honestly the beauty of our business because I think the alternative where you're able to produce the same thing over and over again, while perhaps easier, just hinders the longevity of your business. We have buyers of like small independent boutiques. So I'm not talking about a big department store with 50 doors. I'm talking about like a one-door boutique in, you know, wherever city in America, who have been buying the line for 15 years. And they're like, it is remarkable that you're a small accessories brand that I can keep buying because I have a pretty small stable of loyal customers. And typically once they buy, you know, 3, 4, 5 pieces of jewelry from a brand, they're like, okay, we got it. We purchased what that jewelry brand has to offer. And unfortunately, I then end up oftentimes dropping that line just because I don't have this revolving door of customers and they no longer have an appetite for that brand. But so many buyers give us the feedback of like, your brand, whilst recognizable, continues to evolve because the materials go in and out and do change. And that has really allowed us to maintain strong relationships with independent retailers who we can continue to provide a new look to season after season. So we, as you say, have these loyal customers who might buy 1 or 2 pieces a year and establish these terrific collections. And the pieces really look quite different. It's not like they're buying a gold chain each season. That doesn't really evolve. And so for that reason, I think we are able to like keep the lights on every year because the materials that we're using allow us to just create really drastically different things, even though they still all have that kind of like Lizzie Fortunato aesthetic.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I think what you're doing is creating an aesthetic for your clients. Do you
Certainly trying, yes.
Yeah. Do you keep an archive? I would imagine that it's quite exciting.
Oh my gosh, yeah, we do keep samples of everything, and it's gotten to the point where like our back hallway of our office is lined with filing cabinet drawers that stores all of these things, because we do 4 seasons a year. Each season's about 100 unique pieces, and we've been doing this for 15 years. And then that doesn't even include like we've done runway collaborations with different runway designers, and we've done exclusives and things like that. So the number of pieces is remarkable, and it's interesting. I was talking to the design team, which is just me and 2 other gals, recently in a design meeting, and we were like, we just need to comb through all of these drawers and bring, like, if we're ever having a design block, like we just need to go to the drawers and like bring something back, because we can barely remember them, let alone someone else.
It's like going shopping in your closet. That's what I always
call it. Totally. It's so fun, and it's some of the pieces, you know, from the early years, 2010, 2011, we may have only produced like 20 of something. So it's not like that piece was widely distributed or ever seen by that many people. It's basically, you know, new to everyone.
Yeah. Now, we talked a little about, you know, including precious materials with non-precious jewelry. Or do you ever feel like you want to recreate something that you've done in non-precious materials entirely in precious materials?
Totally. I love this question. And I often do want to do that. It's interesting. We actually have less success when we do that if the customer has already seen and appreciated it in the non-precious materials, because at the end of the day, our customer is savvy. And if they're like, okay, if I can get that for $495 as opposed to $1,700, I'd rather, and the $495 version still looks good and is made with intention and is made in a way that it's going to last me 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Why do I need to spend more on it? And I go back and forth on this a lot, because we've had some necklaces that I really like. They would be on like a vermeil chain, which is a gold plated sterling silver chain, and then it might be a pendant with like a stone in it. And I'm like, wow, I just kind of want to do the same pendant, but instead of a peridot, use an emerald, and instead of the vermeil chain, use an 18 karat chain. It will be basically the exact same look, but it would be precious materials instead. And when we do this, the traction is not there. People are like, do something else in the fine, because we already saw this in the costume, quote, costume version. So it's interesting. People don't really want to see the same thing from us in 2 different lights. I think they'd rather just see new product if we're doing it in the precious version. With that said, for me personally, I'm like, I always want to recreate everything every possible way and toy with all my options and, you know, see it all the way as possible.
But it's interesting because historically costume was essentially like a copy of what was happening in the fine jewelry world, you know, and like a lot of women would recreate, you know, their precious jewels so they can travel with them in non-precious materials. So I love that, like, you're kind of like thinking of working backwards.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's completely the reverse, and in part because we were founded as a quote costume jewelry brand. So now when we are dipping our toe into more precious materials, it's not necessarily because we want to create the same thing in precious. It's that we want to, you know what it is? It's most often I want to play with a material that is just far too expensive or far too limited to use in our main line. So I was, for example, last February, I was in Tucson for the gem show, and I found like, you know, 50 of a beautiful tourmaline strand, and it was a bit costly. And then it was also like, I can only get these 50. After the 50, it's finished. And for our main collection, our costume collection, 50 strands isn't going to get us far enough. Like most of our necklaces will make, say, 100 or 150 up. So to make 50 of something ends up being more work than it's worth, because then people want more. We can't make more. So I was like, well, instead of using this in our main collection, let's do like a limited run of these and use a 14 karat closure and put little rubies in between the tourmalines or whatever it is. And let's market this as a finer collection. Which we've done with a lot of success, but I don't think the impetus was just to go into fine. I think the impetus was once again returning to this discovery of materials that so governed my design career. I think that the impetus was like, I want to be able to use these materials that I found, and they're going to be limited, and therefore they should be more expensive. And while we're at it, why don't we use a gold closure instead of a brass closure to further distinguish them. So as you're saying, it's really the reverse of the historical approach, which is the costume as the knockoff.
Yeah. But this is actually a testament to what you said earlier, which I really loved, which is like designing or creating with intention. So, I mean, really, it's like, you're choosing to work with these materials, not because you want to check a box, but
Right.
because you're so inspired by them and you want to sort of, I like almost like a kid in the candy store. You're like, what can I do with this? Because it's so good,
Absolutely. That's so true. And it's honestly, it's like probably selfish too, because I love creating those like small run pieces. I think everyone else in the office is like, oh my goodness, we're only making 4 of this. Why on earth are we doing this? Like, but for me, I'm like, this is what fuels my creativity. We can like make 4 of this super special thing. In the same way that our statement jewelry from the main collection is special. This again feels special and inspiring. And like, it is, as you said, not to check a box, but because we want to be able to offer customers this really cool strand that I found, but we just can't do it in, a way where we're going to like offer 50 of them to Saks Fifth Avenue or something like that.
And I bet that for your collectors, it's a real treat when things like
Totally.
that. Yeah,
Totally.
Like
Yeah.
something very special. And
yeah.
So, and now that you've kind of, I guess, if you're designing in 14 karat gold and you've designed, with these precious materials, it's almost like, you have a fine, I don't know why I did this, but but it's like you have a fine jewelry line as well. Do you ever think that you would sort of do you ever think you would launch sort of into fine jewelry with like kind of full force? Do you ever, or do you think you'll still want to sort of keep the fine jewelry really sort of limited and super special?
Yeah, it's a question that we throw around a lot. I don't know that I can totally answer it. I think that for now, the way we're doing it makes the most sense. Like, I am my own customer, and to be honest, I am probably more interested in a $400 piece than a $2,000 piece. I like creating pieces that are accessible but still really special. I like working with so many of the great retailers that have supported us for 15 years, and they're not moving many $2,000 pieces, but they might be moving, a $195 earring all day long. So I think that for now, working in like the price point and with the materials that we've been working in makes sense and feels approachable. It feels accessible. It feels like we're giving people something really special that has great value, because while it's not cheap, it's not as expensive as, fine jewelry. And I like that people are spending and investing and getting something that, will last years and really feel special. With that said, I love the discovery of limited materials, whether that's going into a costume piece or a fine piece. And I am constantly thinking about ways to do little capsules of limited edition materials, because that's what I just really love doing. Last winter on our website, we launched like 20 or so limited edition strands that all used Venetian glass beads from like the 17 and 1800s. And so those pieces weren't actually with 14 karat closures. It was all vermeil. It was still technically costume, but these beads were 200 years old. They were so special. They were so limited. And I just loved making them. Designing them was such a treat for me. So I am constantly trying to think about ways to do things like that and stay inspired with things like that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not costume.
Right. Can you take us a little bit through your design process? Because you mentioned like the Tucson Gem Show and these Venetian beads, and like I sort of imagine you like traveling the globe and going to museums and like. But can you, sort of what inspires you, and how do you what is the process?
Yeah. Discovery of materials is like the number one inspiration. And oftentimes that does come with travel, which is the best post COVID and I had a baby during COVID. So like post baby and post COVID, there's a little bit less travel happening, but the travel is like just the number one thing to get my wheels turning. And so discovery of materials, whether that's in India or whether that's like on 47th Street at a bead vendor here in New York City, I think that's kind of the jumping off point. I'll have inspiration in my head that I'm usually getting from maybe a piece of art or architecture, or something that I saw at a gallery. And so I'll be thinking like about a certain color palette, but it's really when I go discover materials that relates to that inspiration that then I'm like excited to play. So, for example, when I go to India in a few weeks, there's a few vendors I'll be meeting with. I've kind of given them the palette that we're working with for the upcoming season. We're designing fall winter 23 right now. And I'll sit with them and say like, okay, these are the kind of beads we're looking for. This is the general shape and feel that we're going for with the mood of this collection. And we'll really try and buy into materials that reflect our inspiration for that collection. Sometimes it's a little more esoteric, and then sometimes it's pretty literal. The season that we just showed was Portugal inspired. And I know that's like a huge, that's a big inspiration, a whole country, because there is a lot of artisanal, beautiful craft work that's coming out of Portugal. A lot of people have traveled to Portugal recently. I was there this summer, and our design director was also separately there. And we both came back just like with these tiles that we had picked up and with this color palette on our mind. And like every day was sunshine. So we had this like very bright blue and glowing palette like on the tips of our tongues. And we were just like, okay, this is so easy to design into. We have a vision for what we want it to look like. We can communicate that by buying into bright shades of turquoise or lapis or whatever it is. So sometimes that inspiration is more specific, but it's really then going to vendors and saying like, these are the materials I'm looking for to articulate that vision that dictates how a collection comes together. And it's a fun process. I mean, I'll sit with our two designers and the three of us will like throw inspiration ideas back and forth and say like, okay, these are the silhouettes that we need to design into to communicate that vision.
Your mood boards must be incredible.
It's really fun. It's really
like,
fun. And in addition to the mood boards, we really tried to start photographing the collections for our lookbooks in places that really resonate with the inspiration. For fall 22, which is in stores and online right now, it kind of had this mid-century angle, and we ended up shooting the lookbook at the Gerald Luss House, which is a mid-century modern home in north of New York City. And Gerald Luss was the architect and designer responsible for the Time Life building, which was like the basis for Mad Men. So he totally embodied this like mid-century vibe, and the house really reflected that. And it was just like the coolest backdrop for necklaces that had these kind of like mid-century biomorphic shapes and this kind of like blue and teak brown color palette. And then so much of the interior house was like wood paneling that spoke to the browns that we were using in the jewelry. So it just like came together in a way where we were really able to communicate a vision.
That sounds incredible. Oh my God.
It's
and
very
it's on
fun.
The website now, so everybody should go and check it out.
Exactly.
Do you, oh my gosh. So do you, before everything sort of hits the website or before you debut it, are you sort of like the guinea pig? Are you wearing everything, trying it on, seeing how it feels like?
Definitely. We do a lot of wear testing in the office because the vast majority of our pieces are produced in our studio. As they're getting produced, everyone on the team is responsible for like picking things up, trying things on, wearing something home that evening, making sure it's comfortable. Like Kathryn and I always joke that even though we make statement jewelry, we're both like fairly short, petite girls. I'm 5'3", and we have these like pretty busy New York lives that I always am like on the subway to work at 8 in the morning and not on the subway home from work until like 7 at night. And in between is super busy, often running up to the garment district. So I'm like, if I'm wearing statement jewelry, it has to be comfortable and easy to wear, which means that it's very much like a hands-on process of everyone in the office, like feeling things, touching things, making sure something's not so heavy that it's cumbersome, but not so light that it feels cheap. There's a lot of like hands-on interaction with pieces, which again goes back to like, it's not like we're just sitting back eating bonbons while things get made in a factory in Asia and then we get a box at the doorstep. Like it's really hands-on, and we'll even have like mid-season pivots. Like we'll be trying something on, we'll be like, this actually isn't that comfortable, even though we originally, designed it this way and photographed it this way. Like we need to change how this works. And that happens too. We're I would say we're small and we're nimble.
Yeah. How did you decide to introduce sort of other accessories? You mentioned scarves. How did that come about?
Yeah. Again, that is us kind of like leaning into the capabilities of our vendors. So we really try and like discover materials, and then the people who are providing those materials to us like lean into what they do well. The scarves happened because we were doing seed beading with a vendor in Delhi, and I was going to India to like meet with them, and they were like, And then when I was there, they had this cool fabric, and I was like, what's this? Did you like buy this at the market? And they were like, oh no, we print the fabric. We can like do printed and custom wovens too. And I was like, really? We should make a scarf with you. So just as you were saying before about like not checking the box, it wasn't that we were like, oh, we're dying to do scarves, like let's go for it. It was like, oh, we have a vendor who could potentially do this. We're doing this seed beading with them anyhow. Let's try and expand into that and see what happens. And we haven't never historically been a ring brand, but this past year we started doing blown glass pendants with an amazing glass blower in New York State. And she was like, I can do a ring, like I can, you know, do blown. So she created rings for us, and they were actually one of like our top booking SKUs for last market. So it was so cool because it wasn't even a category that we were like dying to go into, but we introduced it because we were trying to lean into her skill set. And as a result, we're like doing a lot of work with her now, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it's funny because during the pandemic, you know, with everyone sort of on Zooms, you heard, oh my God, statement earrings and necklaces. Like that's what, you know, anybody ever wants to wear. And I actually, when I saw you sign on and you have your headphones, I'm like, but it's impossible to wear all these stupid headphones.
I know.
Earrings. So.
Totally. We're definitely conscious of it. I mean, even like when I usually have bracelets on, but then sometimes I'll be like typing too much and I'm like, okay, the bracelets have to come off. This is unrealistic.
They get in the way. Absolutely. But do you find yourself, I mean, you sort of answered this question, but I love that you're working also with local artisans as well.
Big time.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's actually, I would say probably for a lot of people listening, surprising how much we do locally. Our number one stone cutter, like lapidary, we work with one in Hong Kong, we work with one in India. The one we do by far the most business with is in Washington State. And not even in like a big city or anything. Like she lives just in the middle of Washington State, and we're constantly like UPSing her packages back and forth. And she is a one-woman show working out of her garage doing lapidary work. And it's incredible. She and Lizzie Fortunato Jewels have like built this really robust relationship and great business together. And she's just like a domestic producer who is now doing just like a ton of work for us. So we do a lot of that.
Yeah. And again, supporting a small business. I mean,
big time.
I mean, I can't sort of stress enough how much we admire that.
Thank you. We feel the same way. Kathryn and I often say, like, if we didn't love what we were doing, we wouldn't be doing it because we didn't enter this business just to put more things on the shelves. No one thinks there's a dearth of jewelry out there. There is so much good jewelry. There's so many good accessories. We're not trying to just add to the clutter. We feel super passionately about the way that we're doing it. And that's why we justify us being in this market. But if we didn't love it and love the way we do it, we wouldn't be here because there's a lot to buy out there.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's a really good point. You have to absolutely love what you do. And it shows in the jewelry, it shows you're excited about it and your customers are excited about it.
Absolutely.
Is there a piece that you would say is like your favorite, or is that impossible to choose a favorite?
It's like choosing your favorite child. No, I have some favorites. The piece that I put on the most isn't even that elaborate, but I just love the way it's made. And it's this big Baroque pearl necklace that's hand knotted. And it's chunky. I usually wear it with another strand. So I love mixing it. Even though it's really big, it looks so good layered into a neck mess. And it's called the Estate Pearl Necklace. I buy the Baroque pearls from a vendor in New York City. And then all the hand knotting is done by an incredible team in New Jersey. So it's like a pearl factory that has offices overseas. The woman running it, I think, is the daughter of the founder, or maybe even the granddaughter, but she's incredible. And they are literally like doing traditional hand pearl knotting in New Jersey. So again, supporting another small business. It's like just beautifully made, and I wear it a lot, and that's the Estate Pearl. But yeah, there's a lot of styles, and it's hard to choose. Every season I have a new favorite.
Okay, this is sort of off topic, but not really. How do you store your jewelry?
Oh no, that's a good question. As a matter of fact, little plug here, we are in the midst of designing both a jewelry box and a jewelry roll because we get this question a lot. So I have a jewelry box that my sister gave to me during her wedding, I did like a lot of planning and helping and maid of honor duties. And she gave me a jewelry box as a gift. And I was like, this is the best gift ever, because prior to this, I had like dust bags of jewelry and like in like shoe bags and stuff in just like my underwear drawer. So we are launching a jewelry box. I currently keep things in our jewelry box that I own, but I will, as soon as we have ours, I will be bringing it home and doing double duty. And then for travel, I've always like taken a piece of cloth or even bubble paper and like laid necklaces straight and then rolled them up. And that was the impetus for also designing a jewelry roll that is going to be much more attractive than my bubble paper, because people always ask, like, how do you store it? How do you carry it when you travel? Yeah. And it's a good question.
Yeah. And especially for statement jewelry, you know, like it's not something you can just like throw in a little pouch and like kind of, you know, tuck it in. Like
Totally.
You want to take care of it when you're traveling with it. So
totally. And people do ask, and like, you know, how do you maintain it? And, you know, some of those simple rules, like don't keep your jewelry box in your bathroom, like anywhere that gets humid and has all of that heat and water is going to cause plated jewelry to tarnish faster, and like keep it stored in a dry place, obviously. Be careful when you're wearing like lots of lotions and stuff. So all of those things are things that we talk about when preserving your costume statement jewelry, because even though it's costume, it's still something that I expect to last for a really long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as all good jewelry should.
Exactly.
So how, you mentioned the retailers, but how else and where else should people find your jewelry?
Yes, definitely. So we are based in New York City, and we have a showroom that's open to visitors. So I would invite you all to come visit us. Our showroom hours are 11 to 7, and you can sign up on our website to make an appointment. And it's awesome because you'll get very personalized attention. If you come in wanting to see something specific, we can pull it for you. We can do a range of things. And okay, my sister's sitting in the wings reminding me that as of November 17th, no appointments. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. Let me rewind. On November 17th, in honor of New York City Jewelry Week, we're doing an open house. So no appointment necessary. Come on in. We have a great team of people here who's gonna like get you outfitted in the perfect piece. And everyone here is so familiar with it. So it's not like you're going into some retailer where they have no idea like what the materials are or what's going to look good on you. We can offer very candid, frank advice and get you outfitted perfectly. So November 17th, our showroom is open. We're in Soho, and you can find all the details on our website, which is just LizzieFortunato.com. And then we also sell through our website. And that's where you're going to see the biggest breadth of Lizzie Fortunato pieces. We have like all the exclusives and limited edition styles. And then for people who like shopping brick and mortar, we do sell an awesome assortment of independent retailers and department stores internationally.
That's awesome. It must be amazing too, you know, like if you do trunk shows in different cities, just to have people wearing your jewelry across.
Oh, definitely.
That's such
we did a big tour of stores that we were working with in Japan back in 2014, and I kept seeing like the chicest Japanese women showing up to these events in Lizzie Fortunato, and like about fainted. It was just totally a dream come true. You know, you start a business like ours, and it's so organic. Like in the early days, it was just me knocking on shop owners' doors, being like, "I make jewelry. Do you want to buy a piece?" And then to go to Tokyo and see like incredibly fashionable women wearing your things is just like, wow, you feel great.
Amazing. Well, congratulations to both you and Kathryn. Because it is just incredible, and we're so honored to have you part of Jewelry Week. So should we end by me asking, is costume jewelry really a dirty word?
I think the moral of the story is costume jewelry is not a dirty word if you're doing it in the right way, and anything done in the wrong way makes it a dirty word. We want to be incredibly careful about how we produce, about where we produce. But if you're using non-precious materials, i.e. costume, and you're putting them together in an intentional way, I think awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you, Bella. It's so nice to be here. It's a labor of love what we do, and we really enjoy sharing it with you.
Oh my God, 100%. Yeah, that's what it's a labor of love, and it shows. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
You and to everyone joining us today and all throughout New York City Jewelry Week. So with that, I will say bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.